All right, we've got a debate for you today on the YouTube channel. Stephen Badger versus Matt Mulholland. And we're tentatively naming this, will they wear and tear each other apart? That may allude to some of the questions that are coming down the chute here today. And I'm excited, each of you, we're going to have real debate rules. But I want to let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit first. Mathew Mulholland, the host of the Listen to This Bull podcast and Building Experts Institute. I would love if you could just give a couple sentences or a minute on your background so people know where you're coming from in this debate.
Sure. I started in this industry in 2007 as a roofing contractor. I owned my own roofing company called All Good Roof Systems. When I realized that I was dealing with insurance carriers a little bit better than most people, and then found out what a public adjuster was, I became a public adjuster, started a firm in Georgia, left the roofing company. We became the largest PA firm in Georgia, handling up to 3,000 claims a year, mostly residential roof claims. We eventually switched that up into commercial large loss claims. And then I sold the company to another PA firm so that I could pursue doing education and consulting. I truly enjoy teaching. We opened up the Building Experts Institute almost 7-8 months ago, and it's an online membership portal with education that is inexpensive but extremely detailed, in depth, and we're hoping to get it to as many people as possible to maybe save this industry.
I like that. And I will say the difference that I've seen on your guys' platform is just really high quality videos too, and really in detail stuff. Stephen Badger from Zell Law Firm. Steve's a well-known lawyer who represents first-party property and insurance in the industry. And then it looks like you guys cover like insurance coverage disputes, scope, and stuff like that. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you are doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I pretty much represent most of the commercial property insurance industry in disputed claims. Obviously, the majority of those these days involved wind and hail, but I also represent our clients in disputes involving fires, water, anything else that's covered by a property insurance industry. Most of our clients are commercial insurers, but we also represent a few regional residential insurers as well. So I also see what's going on a regular basis in the residential world. I've been doing this for 31 years. I walked my first roof after Hurricane Andrew in 1992 and have been walking roofs and learning about roofing issues ever since. So I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. And I want to start with an easy one in the debate. We're getting it popping here. So the first one, easy one. And I'm going to start with you, Stephen. This one is submitted by Tim Johnson. And he says, when does the wear and tear exclusion apply?
So the wear and tear exclusion was intended to apply primarily. I'm a lawyer, so I'm always going to give you fudge words, okay, like primarily or mostly. But the wear and tear exclusion was intended to apply where a situation where someone has an old, worn out roof, and they go up there and they look at it on a Tuesday afternoon, and they say, wow, my roof is old and worn out. I think I'm going to submit an insurance claim. So they call the insurance company and say, my roof is old and worn out. The insurance company is going to say the wear and tear exclusion precludes coverage for that claim. Now, contrast that to the situation where the homeowner goes up on the roof on a Tuesday afternoon right after a hailstorm, and that old and worn out roof is totaled by hail. The homeowner calls the insurance company and says, hey, my old and worn out roof was just totaled by a hailstorm. In that situation, there would generally be coverage there. So the wear and tear exclusion is really just intended to not allow an insurance policy to become a warranty or repair policy without any involvement of a covered peril that contributed to the loss. Did I get that right, Matthew?
Yeah. It's frustrating though, because, most of the carriers right now seem to be using wear and tear as their mechanism for denial. And it has a lot to do with the fact that the experts that are sent out are only naming the proximate cause of loss, and they believe that the proximate cause is wear and tear. If not but for the wear and tear, the hail that you described wouldn't have caused the damage. And so they say wear and tear, and then they don't talk about the hail, and the carrier denies for wear and tear.
Yeah, you have to talk about the hail. Obviously, if there was a hail event, you have to talk about hail. Now, you and I, as we have in the past, can get into a deep dive into the concurrent causation doctrine and the efficient proximate cause doctrine. One of those two doctrines applies in every state. And there are times.
How about a medium dive? A medium dive.
Yeah, so a medium dive would be this. Under the concurrent causation doctrine, if two or more causes contribute to a loss, under the concurrent causation doctrine in the states where it applies, the insurance company only owes for the damage caused by the covered cause, does not owe for the non-covered cause, and the burden is on the insured to allocate its damage between the covered and non-covered causes. Texas is a concurrent causation state, so that's the concurrent causation doctrine. And yes, it does result in some situations where insurance companies will consider the role that wear and tear played in the damage that resulted from the hail event. And we can talk a little bit about scenarios. Let me real quickly on efficient proximate cause. In states that are efficient proximate cause, the courts will look at the main primary, most of all cause. And if that's covered, then the whole claim is covered. So everyone who's out there looking at these issues of wear and tear and damage, you need to know whether the state you're in is an efficient proximate cause state or a concurrent causation state. And you should call Mathew and he'll tell you. Right, Mathew?
I do have a list, actually.
Yeah, and I've got an article also. If people, and I'll give you my email address at the end. There's a great article out there, and that we can circulate to people who want to know.
Mathew, any responses to any of that?
The problem with the concurrent causation doctrine, and Steve and I have debated this on LinkedIn once or twice, and even on my podcast, I believe, if there is two causes of loss, one's excluded, one's covered, if you can't separate them, then the covered cause of loss would generally be covered. So with hail and wear and tear, if the hail and the wear and tear is on the same property, the hail damage is still covered. You end up replacing the same property anyway. So if you can separate them, then they would not owe for the area that is worn and torn but has no hail-related damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it would have to be a completely separate area and not part of the same repair section, whatever the repair area would be. So it would be like a separate roof.
Yeah, or a separate issue. And let me give the example that I like to give that I think is the easiest one for people to understand. If you've got an old crappy roof and the whole old crappy roof is demolished by hail, the insurance company owes it. They can't say it was an old crappy roof. You insured it. It's an old crappy roof. The whole thing was damaged by hail. That is the cause of the damage. It's covered. You pay. But you got an old crappy roof and you had 6 or 8 hail strikes on it, and that's it. And those 6 or 8 hardy slate tiles, let's say, are damaged and need to be repaired. So if that was a good roof, you could take those tiles out, put in new ones, and you're done. All right, and it would work. But because it's an old, tired, hardy slate roof, you try to repair, you walk around, and it all just crumbles under your feet, and the whole roof then has to be replaced because of a repairability issue. Under the concurrent causation doctrine, all I owe are the 6 or 8 shingles or slate tiles that were damaged. I don't owe everything else. And that's the famous...
Matt, I saw some... Can I get a very short response, and then we're going to move on to the next question?
Oh, you don't want to move on? The whole thing is about war and tearing each other apart. I mean, this is the best possible question series ever.
All right. You take a little bit of extra time then.
All right. This is good. This is good dialogue. So, if with repairability issues, we still have to repair the damaged tiles, and the repairability of that does come into play for those. If we ignore the wear and tear and there's still a repairability issue, if anybody has ever dealt with hardy plank or cementitious tiles in general, it is brittle even from day one. It's hard to take those off, and a lot of times you end up having to take a lot of them off, and there's a lot of damage. But if there is unavoidable damage that's caused during the repair of a damaged tile, that unavoidable damage is part of the direct physical loss, and that is covered by the policies, is it not?
That I don't argue with. Okay, if there is unavoidable damage, if it was a good tile and you'd have to break a couple to get the other ones done, of course, we have to do what it takes. But if they all crumble around you when you walk along the roof and everything, just because they're old and tired, that's a wear and tear issue. That's the famous All Saints case from Texas. That is one of the first concurrent causation cases. I'm happy to send it to anyone. That is exactly the scenario that I laid out. And the court held in that case that the insurance company only owes the 6 or 8 tiles.
But you're talking about walking on it and damaging it and creating wear and tear damage or footfall damage. That's the damage that wouldn't be covered because it's separable from the loss. Even in the All States case, if it can't be separated, then it would be covered. So damage that is caused during the repairs, it's unavoidable. That would be covered. I don't want to obscure the language just because they are walking on it. Maybe they need to do it from a cherry picker or something. But if they're unable to repair the damaged tiles without causing further damage, the further damage would be covered. Use a cherry picker, I guess. So you're not making footfall damage that wouldn't be covered because that's not part of it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to disagree with you because that's not what the All Saints case says. I use walking as an example, but the other problem was that the shingles around it, tiles around it, were crumbling as they tried to repair the damaged ones, and the court said we don't owe for those. Now, but I would say
plaintiff counsel on that case wasn't exactly the best, but that's fine. There's good. We've talked about it before. We'll be able to move on here, but generally speaking, and you and I agreed on this just earlier today, a few seconds ago, that if it can't be separated, then the covered cause of loss is still covered, even in concurrent causation states, and damage that is unavoidable during the repairs of the covered damage is still covered as part of the direct physical loss.
I understand that's your position. I agree with some of that, but not all.
You agreed to that a few minutes ago.
Well, not all of it. I did not agree to everything you said there. All right, I agreed that if you got to damage a couple of tiles to fix the damaged ones, I don't have a problem with paying for those. Okay, but if those,
why is it just a couple?
Well, whatever it is. All right, if it's a few, but if everything around it starts crumbling more than it would have been had it not been a defective tile, that ain't my problem.
I really want to get you to say several now for some reason.
Okay, guys, a lot of these questions do relate to similar type things, so I'm going to keep it moving. And then if we want to come back to this and discuss any more detail, I think that's great.
Are we going to be able to ask each other questions? I have a good question that came up.
If we keep some 2-minute answers, then yes. And I understand it's going to be difficult, so that's why we're going to keep it loose occasionally. This one is from Mike Goldenstein. I'm going to shout out their company if I know it. Rooful is the company. What is one thing? I'm going to start with Matt here. What is one thing, something reasonable that contractors could do to reduce friction and speed up the claim process?
Their job. So if they're going to go out there and they're going to, I don't want to say represent the policyholder, but show the damages and present the damages to the carrier and discuss their bid. Presenting those damages is a lot more of a job than what you think. If they would spend the time in the beginning to actually put together, as an expert report where they literally put down their opinions in writing. A photo report is not an expert report. You need to put something down. It's called a trade statement. Be the tradesman that tells what happened and why. Submit that as evidence of what occurred. Give a copy of a PDF of that to the policyholder to submit to the carrier, and then be there and describe that exact same thing to the carrier. And don't leave stuff out. Don't leave out the fact that the roof is old. Let them know, this roof is old, and that's why the hail was able to cause damage. And that way you would avoid a lot of the threshold size hail damage crap. Let them know that the roof isn't installed perfectly. Some of the shingles that weren't installed right have become more susceptible to wind damage. And now typically undamaging winds have been able to come through and cause damage. And that's why. And that wind damage is still covered in those cases in the vast majority of situations. So do the job. Don't half-ass it. Don't just send in photos, and don't play defense where you're just waiting to see what the carrier says. So many of you are out there thinking, oh my God, what if the carrier gave a higher estimate than what I wrote? It's not going to happen. It's just, why are you doing that? Just do your job, write the estimate, put together a trade statement, submit it to the policyholder, let them send that in, and then act like a contractor.
All right, Stephen, same question for you. What is something reasonable that contractors can do to reduce friction and speed up the claim process?
Yeah, I'll give you two quick answers. The first one, I agree with the last sentence that Mathew just said, with one slight change. Mathew said, write an estimate, send it to the carrier, and then be a contractor. I would say write up a bid, write up a contract price bid. All right, get out of the insurance proceeds world and get into the pricing, real pricing world. I don't know why any dumbass contractor would sign a contract with an insured homeowner that says, I will work for what the stingy insurance company is willing to pay. Okay, that's stupid. Right? Figure out what your price is, put that in the contract, give that to the insurance company, explain your price to them, explain to them what the damage is, and then do your job and put on a new roof. Okay, so that's number one. Tell the insurance company what it's going to cost. Number two, tell the adjuster that I'm not a supplementing blah, blah, blah. I won't say the word, okay? I know what happens with a lot of contractors. They finish their job with an eye toward shipping off the job to a supplementing company in another state who are professional Xactimate writers who are going to juice up your estimate, add a bunch of line items, call the insurance company and lie and say they work for you, and try to get more money out of the insurance company and take 20% of that. Okay, I am not a fan of supplementing companies. The insurance companies know they're out there. All right, so if I'm a contractor, I'm going to tell the adjuster, hey, this is a good price. Okay, I'm going to do it for this. Now, I might have to supplement if we find 2 sheets of plywood that are rotten. Okay, but I'm going to tell you what that is in advance. I'm going to bill you for the cost myself, but I'm not going to supplement you to death, and I'm not going to just dump this in appraisal, because adjusters are paid by the claim. Give them a reason to pay. All right? Give them a reason to pay.
Steve and I agree mostly on this, but I have a follow-up to this. It'll just be a second. Just be a second.
I was saying, we got to insert our supplement experts commercial right here in the debate.
Hey guys, this is Bruce by Don, and when dealing with insurance companies, you definitely need an expert by your side. So if you need someone to walk in, hold your hands throughout the insurance process, not really, Max. Deal with the experts, supplement experts.
You can hold my hand.
All right, Matt, response?
And we just watched a commercial. I'm curious who you put in after that statement from Steve. That'll be really fun. Yeah. Okay. Now you tripped me up a little bit. So supplement companies, they're legitimate supplement companies. They're not all there just to inflate the deal. It's there to do back-end processing for contractors. And if they are hiring this company, then they do actually work for the contractor. But having said that, we mostly agree. All right. Fluffing estimates is not appropriate at all. However, the estimatics that are in most of the carriers' guidelines are not in policyholders' favor, and they're not really designed to appropriately estimate a bid for things. So there are going to be things that are supplemented for that are legitimate that you and I probably would end up having a disagreement about. And I would say they're legitimate. Maybe you'd say that you feel like it's fluff. But somewhere in the middle there is a happy medium, I think. And people need to stop shooting for the moon. There is this idea, there's this strategy that if you start high and they start low, you'll end up somewhere in the middle. I have plenty of evidence that if you start at the right number, which is generally somewhere in the middle, then you could get them most of the way there and be happy enough. But if you can't get there, is appraisal a failure in your opinion?
No, the appraisal is an invaluable tool, but don't drive a matter to appraisal because you're being greedy and trying to maximize the claim. Give the insurance adjuster a reason to pay. Adjusters want to move on, right? Most get a flat amount per claim. The longer it drags on, the less they want to deal with it. If you give them a reason to pay with a retail price and a reputation that you're not going to supplement the crap out of them, except for real supplementing issues that are warranted, you're going to have a lot better success with adjusters.
I think we can boil that down into a single statement. Don't be a dick.
Well, look, everyone laughs at me when I speak to contractors and I say, what? Be nice. Yeah, be nice. All right. Adjusters, they want to pay claims. Adjusters want to pay claims. And if you give them a reason to pay, it's going to be easier. And the easiest thing you can give them is a reasonable fixed price.
I agree. If you give the carrier the option to pay whatever they want with your own contract saying that, what do you think they're going to do? Yep. You're giving them the option to pay what they believe is right. I mean, let me ask you this then. If you had a bid that was signed off on the contract, but the contract said, we will do the work for this price if the carrier approves it, so it's kind of a hybrid, how would that work out?
That's fine. It's a price. Yeah, there's a price there. The adjuster knows if I pay this price, I'm done. All right, I can go to the carrier, then I'm the adjuster and says, look, it's $1,800 more than my exact made estimate, but it's in the ballpark. This guy doesn't supplement us to death. I know him from prior claims. Let's get it done. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that works out better too.
All right, so my next question is from Josh Pinter. Looks like he's from American Shield Roofing. He says, when will insurance companies and state departments of insurance start going after homeowners for not paying their deductible? And I'm going to ask Stephen to answer this one first.
Yeah, so this one's dear to my heart. I spent several months of my life working with RCAT and North Texas Roofing in 2019 to pass our deductible law in Texas. And the version that I wrote with the legislative sponsors actually would have held both the homeowners and the contractors responsible for waiving deductibles. That bothered the Democratic lawmakers because they didn't want bad insurance companies going after homeowners for not paying their deductibles. And they said they were going to kill the bill if that stayed in it. So to get a bill passed that would address the predominant problem that was waiving by certain contractors, we took that out. But I agree. Homeowners should be equally responsible for scheming with contractors not to pay their deductibles. Unfortunately, that did not make it through the legislative process. With that said, though, a homeowner who asks that their deductible be waived and then does not tell the insurance company it's being waived and then lies to us in their RCV holdback request, that homeowner is committing insurance fraud. So if someone's aware of a homeowner who has lied to me, my client, about whether the deductible was paid, and then they misrepresented the amount actually incurred in getting their RCV holdback, that is felony insurance fraud, and I would be tickled pink to know of some homeowners who did that and have the documents to prove it, because I'd love to help make an example of someone. So we're all on the same page on that issue.
Matthew, is that true? Are we on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, it's illegal. There's no questions. It's there, black and white. If you waive a deductible and then you submit an invoice saying that you're charging that full amount, that's a fraudulent invoice. And a contractor can be held for insurance fraud as well. I mean, I think the question ultimately is when will the carriers and the departments go after the homeowner that just doesn't pay the deductible and screws the contractor over who wasn't party to that situation?
Well, look, if the homeowner doesn't pay his deductible and we know it, then we don't have to pay the RCV holdback. All right, that is in our Texas law. And we did that intentionally to create a simple enforcement mechanism that you don't get your RCV holdback unless reasonable proof of deductible payment is provided.
A lot of times they don't know it's going to happen until after the RCV payment is sent out.
And that's unfortunate. And I'll tell you, if there are situations where we can prove homeowners and contractors complicit, I promise you, if someone sends me that, I will turn it in to the TDI fraud unit as a fraud complaint. I'll do it myself.
What if the contractor is not complicit and it's just a policyholder? Are they likely to do anything?
Well, if it's just the policyholder, I'm not sure how that works without the contractor being complicit. Contractors,
The contractor's still billing for it, and the homeowner says, "No, I'm not giving it to you. I could have gotten this. Someone else would have covered my deductible. I'm not paying my deductible, period."
So that's not my issue. That's the contractor's issue. That homeowner's not going to get their RCV holdback. All right. So that's all I can do. I can withhold the RCV holdback. And I hope the companies do that. All right. If they're not, then
Do
shame
you
on
think
the
that might be
companies.
insurance fraud?
I'm sorry?
Do you think it's insurance fraud since the estimate provided by the policyholder, because of what was sent to them by the contractor, but the estimate provided by the policyholder intended not to ever pay that deductible? Is that a fraudulent invoice from the policyholder?
Okay, a couple of questions. Not insurance fraud because the homeowner is not representing anything to us. Is it a fraudulent invoice? It's the contractor's invoice. But what it is, it's a clear breach of contract by the homeowner.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I agree on that, but it potentially could be insurance fraud if the insured intended to never pay that and then sent in that contract or the invoice anyway.
If they sent that in and represented, an insurance fraud is material misrepresentation in support of a claim. So they sent that in trying to get insurance company holdback money, even though it wasn't paid. That is a material misrepresentation. Yeah. The problem is then that's a no harm, no foul, no financial loss crime, and it's really hard to get local DAs to go after those. That's just the reality. Yeah.
The financial hardship's on the contractor in those cases, but the contractor isn't always necessarily a natural person that they tend to care about so much. So, yeah.
Okay,
Unfortunate,
I'm going
but
to get into my next question here. This one is from Derek O'Day. He is a public adjuster at Pine Hills Property Claims. He asks, what should a policyholder do when they have a legitimate, valid covered claim that is being denied by the insurance company? Oh man, this one might be a leading question. What should a policyholder do when no one will do the work for the price? I like this one. For the price the insurance company will agree to pay, except the insurance company's contractor, who they do not believe will do quality work. I'm going to ask this first to Matt.
Of course you would. I really want to hear Steve's answer to this. When a carrier sends out to a contractor, it says they have a preferred vendor. A lot of times those preferred vendors have special deals. They have contracts where they have to abide by estimatic systems in many cases, or potentially have to give a discount over their normal services, or they have to work directly from whatever the carrier's scope of work is. So if it is a preferred vendor, oftentimes it's not exactly fair. And a lot of times those preferred vendors, when they say that they could do the work for that price, will end up supplementing as well, but you don't know that in advance. So the real question is, would that contractor that is being offered by the carrier actually do the work for that price? Because if they can't actually perform that work, then they're not a bona fide contractor. This isn't a real bid. But what is the purpose that the contractor has in this, or the carrier? The carrier wants to see if your estimate is way out of line or not, generally speaking, and if someone else would be able to do it. But if they're using a preferred vendor, I think that there's potentially the opportunity for underhandedness. If they would get an actual third-party contractor to go out and give another bid or something, I think that would be a lot more useful for everybody involved. But what can the public adjuster do? Public adjuster can let them know if there is a contractor that's already involved. Here's the bid from the contractor that's actually going to perform the work. That person's contract and amount of the claim, or the way Steve calls it, the measure of the claim, would be the most realistic, simply because that's the contractor doing the work. If the carrier disagrees with it, like it's way out of line, if someone's gouging, that's what appraisal is for. So if they're just sending someone out to identify if this is price gouging, then that's okay to me. But if they're sending someone out and they're saying that they have to use this pricing because this is what the carriers come up with using their preferred vendor, that's not okay.
I'm going to ask Stephen the same question. What should a policyholder do when no one will do the work for the price the insurance company will agree to pay, except the insurance company's contractor, who they do not believe will do quality work?
Yeah, so let's ignore that last part of the sentence for now, the regard for the preferred contractor, because that's a whole nother issue. All right, if the insurance company's measure is less than what you think it's going to cost to do the work, all right, you got three options. One, you can continue to work with them and give them a reason to pay. Right? Demonstrate to them why your pricing is accurate. You have to try that through the things we talked about earlier. Number two, that's why the appraisal process is there. All right, invoke the appraisal process and move forward with appraisal. Or number three, hire a PA or hire a lawyer. So there are mechanisms built into the policy and the law to help the homeowner in that situation. Now, I know, we don't want to lawyer up. I know we don't want to have to pay for that. I get it. So that's why I always begin with give the insurance carrier a reason to pay. Continue to try, be nice, all the things we talked about in the prior answer. Now, with that said, let's go to the other part of the question, and that's the managed repair or preferred contractor. I will say this very carefully, all right? Generally, an insurance carrier should not base its measure on what a preferred contractor is willing to do the work for, okay? Under some type of preferred contractor program. Because maybe there are discounted prices that the general market contractors cannot get, or other reasons. So that concerns me in that situation. But that's entirely different than getting a real bid from a real brick and mortar local contractor who would do the work for that price to establish fair market pricing. We do that all day long, and I think that is absolutely legitimate.
Yeah,
Okay.
if the contractor is being sent out, I agree. If the contractor being sent out to establish what would actually be there, if they are a legitimate contractor, that doesn't mean that they're going to be lower. They might end up being much higher as well. And if that's the case, then pay the claim. But ultimately, if you're, I think we agree on this.
Yeah, and let me just say, and we do this all the time. I just want to know what it's really going to cost. So if I got a dispute on a tile roof, I'm calling Paul Ramon because he's the tile guy and say, Paul, what would you charge to do this job? Because everybody knows and likes Paul. If it's a TPO Duralast roof, I'm calling Dave Custable and saying, hey, Dave, you're the Tri-Van, you're the Duralast guy. Go tell me what it's going to cost. And then I tell my client, this is the real competitive cost. And it's good for my client to hear that. And it's also good for the other side to hear that because there's real roofers who will do it right for that price.
As long as you're doing the right job, I agree. Yeah.
I want to ask the next question. This one is also from Tim Johnson, Smith Jaden Johnson. His question is, when does building code coverage trigger? I.e., when I tear off hail damaged shingles and the decking is delaminated and needs to be replaced as well. And this will go to Stephen first.
I think Mathew knows what I'm going to say. Building code coverage is triggered when the policy applies and has building code coverage applicable. So building code upgrade coverage is a very nuanced area because it depends upon the building code upgrade coverage in the policy. And carriers like to tinker with that language, depends upon the nature of the policy, what you pay for the policy. So it really is a policy dependent issue. But one of the key issues with building upgrade coverage is that it is dependent upon enforcement. All right, there must be enforcement of the law or ordinance. All right, so if it's not something that's going to be enforced and is not enforced, there is generally not any coverage for it. So I don't know how to answer it any better than that. Are there specific scenarios? Sure, I could talk about his scenario, but without knowing what the code upgrade coverage is, this is a really hard area to get into.
Matt, you want to give any context there?
Yeah. Well, let me add on to that, and then I have a question for Steve on that word enforcement. But the generally speaking, and this is very general because Steve's right. Every policy is different, especially in this particular clause. But for most policies, coverage A, coverage B would cover compliance with code for the replacement costs of the stuff that's damaged on the roof that's there now, and the enforcement of increased cost over the normal course of construction, increased costs over the RCV of that property is what building code coverage would generally cover. So if it isn't currently there on the property, there's no RCV value to it. There's no like kind of quality of nothing that's being installed onto it. So that would be an increased cost. That's when you need the code coverage. I think where the problem is for most carriers is the adjusters want to apply code coverage anytime a contractor or a PA mentions that it's required by code to do something, just because that says the word code in it, when in reality, coverage A usually covers compliance.
I will agree, Matthew, that as a general proposition, when we're installing a like kind and quality roof, that the carriers should ensure that it is a manufacturer and code compliant roofing system. As a general proposition, I agree. The code upgrade battles typically are when you got a 15-year-old roof that's got 1 inch of ISO, and the current code says you got to have R20 or R24 or whatever, and you got to go to 4 inches of ISO. Right. I mean, that's what we're dealing with mostly in that situation. The enforcement issue comes into play when we all know that the local building official is not making anybody go back with 4 inches of ISO, but just because it's insurance, then they're enforcing it against us. That is, and we could get into all the nuances of that, but that's a type of scenario that we need to dig a little deeper in.
I really would love to know, and I know that the policies don't define this, and you're not going to be speaking for the carriers you represent here, but in general, what would be your personal definition of enforcement?
A building official that says that I will not give you a permit unless you put 4 inches of ISO.
Permitting is involved. What if they don't do permitting for re-roofing at all?
Yeah, then that's an interesting question. It gets a little harder. We'd have to look at the policy language in that situation. If there's no one actually enforcing the code, I do know that some carriers will take the position that without enforcement of the code, then there's no code upgrade coverage in that situation. But I also recognize that the codes are there for a reason, and I would instruct my client to look at the issues here and evaluate that issue closely.
Okay. I think that is a sticking point for us is how enforcement is defined. And that's an issue that we've had for many, many years. Yep. If it isn't defined in the policy and it's ambiguous, it can be read in multiple ways. The Department of Community Affairs says it's enforced in their writings, but the building official who just doesn't have the manpower to go out to everything doesn't do any kind of an inspection or give permitting for something. That doesn't mean it's not enforced necessarily. So the ambiguity there ought to be given to the policyholder.
I understand the argument that ambiguity weighs in favor of the policyholder. I get that. Yep.
Okay. So we are going to get down here kind of quick with a few final questions. So I'm wondering if we could start a speed round.
Sure.
At the risk of losing some complexity here, and I understand that. But if you guys don't mind, 1 minute answers on the next couple, and then that way we'll allow you guys to each ask each other one final question. So Chelsea Smith Favor asks, she's from TLC Roofing and Restoration and Q Claims, and she asks to just Steve. If appraisal is just the other side taking advantage, why in the world do 98% of appraisals settle in favor of the consumer?
I don't think I've ever said that appraisal is just the other side taking advantage. A. B, I disagree with your contention that 98% of appraisals end in favor of the consumer, because just by the nature of a dispute, if I'm at $1 and you're at $2, is $1 in favor of the consumer? There's only one way to go usually, and that's up. So that doesn't mean that I lose every appraisal. If your number is $2 but it resolves for $1.99, does that mean that I won the appraisal? So the premise is wrong.
Yep.
Okay.
Steve's
Matt,
not wrong here. Appraisal, it's almost a split the baby kind of a thing. In general speaking, a lot of times that's what happens. That doesn't mean that someone was right or wrong most of the time. You could definitely make the argument that any dollar amount that's higher is proof that the carrier was wrong, but that's just not how appraisal actually generally goes. It's not that scientific a lot of times. It's a good old boy system many times, and it's got some issues, but I'm I'm going to alienate my own base here by saying it, but I think Steve's right on this.
Okay. All right, let's get into the next one. Speed round once again. What's your take on hiring engineers to identify hail damage, and what standards should they apply to their work? I'm going to let Matt go first on this one.
Why would you hire an engineer to identify hail damage? What kind of scientific testing are they doing on site? None. Half of them have never been on a roof when they go out there. I don't understand the purpose of that. A roofing contractor should have much more authority on when something is damaged, and any of us can take the exact same courses to identify when it's caused by hail. I think it should be based on experience more than whether or not someone has an engineering degree in civil engineering that doesn't go into what hail is or isn't, but instead gets into failure of materials. So forensic engineers that go out there, I think the biggest issue that we have with it is that they're not given thresholds from the policy or definitions from the policy, and they're going out and they're using their own definitions, and that's inappropriate and it causes some problems. And I said this earlier, they're only naming what they believe is the proximate cause instead of all the causes of loss.
Steven?
No carrier should send an engineer out on a roof who has never walked a roof before. All right? Neither side should do that. That's dumb. All right? I can assure you that none of my clients in matters I'm involved with are sending engineers out to walk roofs who have never walked a roof. All right? Now, on the flip side, I could easily say, as Matthew generally said, that, and some of these really crappy engineers working for policyholders, they're mostly civil or structural guys, and they've never walked a roof. So, we could both say that, but let's be honest.
Yeah, it's usually a defensive measure, though. It's a reaction. A lot of times the policyholders hire an engineer. They don't want to spend the money because the carrier has hired an engineer. Now you have to have engineer versus engineer, which doesn't actually make sense.
Well, let's go to the basic premise. My client's obligation is to conduct a reasonable investigation. And if I just rely upon an adjuster, who I admit is a generalist, he may have a foundation claim on Monday, a fire claim on Tuesday, and a roofing claim on Wednesday. So he needs help. And in conducting a reasonable investigation, he's going to hire a roofing professional to go out there who knows roofing and will help him identify whether the roof's damaged by hail. And my clients hire roofing professionals. We hire people who are experienced in roofing issues for roofing losses. We hire fire experts for fire losses. And I'd be very surprised if that is not the general situation you see with most claims from most insurance companies. Maybe there are a few. Maybe there are a few that don't do that, and that's unfortunate.
No, they do that, and that's the point. The juries agree. That sounds really reasonable. It sounds like you're doing everything you can. The problem is in how those reports come out and what they're tasked to do. Let me ask you a question. You said earlier that you believe that you should name all the concurrent causation that happens. What would be the easiest way to get an adjuster to ask the engineer specifically to name all the causes of loss that are acting on that property to produce that loss?
I'm not sure I understand that question. But I'm not dodging it, Matthew. I don't understand it and why you're even asking.
I'd love to have that conversation with you later, because that's a legitimate issue that I think would solve a lot of problems without really saying that anyone's lying, because they're not. It's just that they're only saying the proximate cause, and their way of defining that is a little bit obscure.
All right, Tim, let's go back to your speed round.
Okay, and you get a question like that for Matt here in a second, but Matt just blew his, so it's gone.
That's an important one to me.
This one's Chad Williams. He said, at what point, this one's not leading at all, at what point are there so many exclusions to coverage that policies become illusory? At what point are the stall and delay tactics so outrageous to render policies functionally illusory? I'll let Steve answer this one.
At what point do the inflated estimates and fraudulent claims submitted to my client make the claim process so bad that my clients have to exclude damn near everything in order to still make a reasonable profit? Questions like that are stupid. They're not productive to having a real dialogue. All right. That's basically the all insurance companies and everybody who worked for them suck mentality. All right. That's wrong.
So I said it for last.
All right. So
I did say that one for last just for your enjoyment.
I can't wait to cut that out as a clip.
Yeah, that just bothers me when I hear that. So here, let me answer it, though, a little bit substantively. Right? Exclusions are there not because some insurance company guy was sitting around drinking wine on Sunday night thinking of something to take out of the policy. Insurance companies love uniformity. They love consistency. All right. Everything is done based on uniformity and consistency. But when there's an abuse or something is a problem so great, they have to address it. Cosmetic damage endorsements, they didn't used to exist. But because everybody started submitting claims for tiny little dents that could only be seen when the sun is at a certain angle, they had to address that issue. Guess what I'm writing right now? I'm writing an exclusion for roof dents to TPOs and EPDMs that result in tiny dents to the insulation below. And why is that happening? Because a bunch of bullshit claims are getting submitted where there's tiny little dents and maybe a little split to the facer sheet. All right, so we've got these exclusions because of abuses. All right, so quit abusing the process and you'll quit getting exclusions.
Matthew?
I mean, that's the appropriate response when the contract does pay for those tiny little dents and those facer tears that are there. I mean, it is covered. So it have to be specifically written out for what you would consider abuses to not be covered, which creates these coverage gaps. So I understand where both sides are at on this. If it is, they are in business to create a profit, so they have to be able to do so. But that contract has to be very specific. So I don't think it's abusive to file a claim on something like that when it is legitimately covered. But if it isn't legitimately covered and they continue to file claims on that, that's where I would have a problem. If it is demonstrable and detrimental to the property and it's a physical alteration, that's damage.
Stephen, do you have a final question for Matt?
No, I enjoy the dialogue. Matthew and I will have time to ask questions of each other over beer soon. So, no, that's great. Tim, thank you.
And I want to say thank you guys for joining me once again. If you could just say your name and your company name, and if somebody needs you, what they would contact you for.
My name is Matt Mulholland with Listen to This Bull, which you can find on YouTube, and with the Building Experts Institute that you can find at buildingexperts.institute. If you're looking to get a hold of me, reach out to me via email. It's Mathew, spelled with one T, at listentothisbull.com.
I'm Steve Badger with Zell LOP in Dallas. I sit down every night with a glass of wine before bed, and I answer all the emails from various people in the industry. So if you want to send me an email and talk about something that's on your mind, my email address is sbadger@zell, ZELLE, law.com. I'd also encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of interesting discussion issues on LinkedIn, which causes Matthew and I to have a lot of interesting exchanges. But I do believe that the discussions we have on LinkedIn are very productive for our industry and raise awareness of the issues that are both driving us crazy from the other side. And I think that the discussion is healthy and good. And I thank you, Tim, for having us today.
Absolutely. And I want to say I do respect yourself putting yourself out there in this position to debate these things when you know this is for contractors and stuff like that. And thank you for doing that. And thank you, Matt, for taking the time to be part of this today. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. And thanks for everyone for watching. Comment below if we did this again, what's the question you would ask? And you guys have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.